anyway, just to get the folks that wanted to testify in and out of here as quickly as possible. So with that, Delegate Levine, you have the floor. Please present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HB 2081 is a bill to protect people in polling places and canvassing centers, recount centers. It prohibits the knowing possession of a firearm within 40 feet of a polling place, a canvassing place, a recount place. We all know the signs outside polling places. All of us who've ever run for election, they're very clear that you can't solicit a vote within 40 feet of the entrance of any polling place. Most of the ones I attend, they actually draw a line on the ground to make clear exactly where you can and can't stand. And registrars are very used to posting those signs. This has been practiced for a very long period of time. What this bill does is it modifies that section of 24.2604 and says that those same signs that say you can't solicit within 40 feet of a polling place also say no firearms within 40 feet of a polling place. And they put the signs up, and there are exceptions. The exceptions would be a law enforcement officer, retired law enforcement officer, anyone who happens to be occupying their own private property. If it's within 40 feet, one could imagine a situation where there's private property right next door to a polling place. Obviously, we're not going to, say that someone can't possess a firearm in their own home. But basically, the purpose of the law is to prevent intimidation. I should also say armed security officers are also an exception to the rule. We have seen, particularly in counting and recount situations, we know, in fact, there were 2 Virginians who were arrested in Pennsylvania when they were counting and recounting the votes because they brought firearms. We want people to be able to be free to vote without intimidation. And folks who are not law enforcement, they're just bringing their guns into a polling place, absolutely can intimidate folks. So the registrars of Virginia, and you're going to hear from them in a minute, strongly support this bill, including registrars from counties where gun ownership is quite high. They support this bill strongly. We also have support from the Virginia Civic Engagement Table, which consists of some 40 separate organizations. The JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council, also supports this legislation, and I encourage this committee to support it as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Are there questions for the patron from members of the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for the patron. Would this prohibition also apply to people who carry concealed weapons and are permitted to do so?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it would.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Adams.
What is the rationale for that? Because in your presentation, you said, the rationale for this legislation is to prohibit intimidation. And obviously, if someone is carrying concealed, the firearm's concealed. So I'd like to hear an explanation of that, if you would, please.
Mr. Chairman, there is no distinction that I'm aware of anywhere in Virginia law in gun possession laws between open carry and concealed carry. For example, we have laws right now that prohibit any weapons in a school, any guns in a church. It doesn't say that you can carry concealed, but you can't carry open. One of my concerns is if we try to make distinctions between open and concealed, we would enter into a whole new complicated area of the law that Virginia's never gone to before, where we'd say, aha, it's concealed, but it was flashed, or maybe it was seen, or maybe it was shown. This is a bright line standard. No one has to question whether the weapon is concealed or it's not. And as I said, there's nowhere in Virginia law that I'm aware of where it says that you can concealed carry, but you can't open carry. So rather than create an entire new body of law, I think there should be a clear bright line standard. After all, put it this way, if you conceal carry and no one knows you have it there, you can't be prosecuted either because no one knows you have it there. So at that point, it would no longer be concealed. Rather than dance on the head of a pin, I think the answer is very clear. We'll just do the same standard we have for schools and churches. No guns in polling places.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Any other questions for the patron at this time?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Delegate Head.
Yeah, just as a point of slight correction, though you may, the patron may think it to be merely a matter of semantics, the prohibition on churches is not the same as it is in schools or courthouses or other places like that, because the prohibition in churches or places of worship is that it's prohibited unless there is sufficient reason to carry it. And it leaves that undefined. So we have intentionally in that legislation left a pretty wide berth. So to equate that, presumably if someone is in fear for their life, is concerned about that and wishes to carry concealed, that could be argued that it might give them the opportunity to do that. And think that it might be of consideration to give the same consideration to people that are traveling to and from polling places, because we don't know where they might have to go between the time they leave their home, the time they get to the polling place, and back again. This is pretty broad legislation as far as I can see.
Mr. Chairman, I would briefly respond that it says within 40 feet. Someone can carry a gun, they can bring it in their car, they can park 40 feet away. 40 feet is not a large distance, and they simply wouldn't be able to carry in their short walk from the car to the polling place.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. All right, I don't see any other hands raised, so why don't we go ahead, Mr. Clerk, and can you tell me, I know you probably already sent me the list, but if you wouldn't mind, how many people do we have queued up to speak in favor and how many against this particular bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are 11 people slated to speak in favor of the bill and 3 people speaking against the bill.
All right, so what I'm going to do for the folks that are queued up to speak for the bill, I'm going to ask you to please restrict yourself to 1 minute, roughly 1 minute, and we may give you some grace to go 15 or 16 seconds over, but try and calibrate for a minute because we've got a lot to get to this morning, and we have a very hard stop at 11 o'clock. Also, be mindful, if you could try and listen to what the speaker before you is saying, and if they've said exactly what you were about to say, it's perfectly okay for you to just say, you know, I agree with what he just said or she just said, rather than having to repeat what's been said before. If you have something new, maybe use your minute, which would have been your second minute to go first on something that's new and different. So with that, so that I don't waste any more time, let's go ahead and take the 11 speakers. Let's start with whoever's first on your list, JD.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The first speaker is Lori Haas with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Lori, please mute your mic, or unmute your mic.
All right, sometimes it takes a second for the first couple folks to get into the room when we open up the public room. So we'll give her just a second to be brought in. There she is. All right.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and Delegate Levine. My name is Lori Haas. I work for the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. We wholeheartedly support the bill. Thank you, Delegate Levine, for carrying this important bill. As we have seen over many years, frankly, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the propensity to carry weapons into more and more sensitive places, polling places, is the bedrock of democracy, where people go to exercise their right to vote. We believe that this is a common sense bill. We believe it is a safety bill. And, concealed carry permit holders, while on, typically an American citizen, the permit doesn't make them some sort of super citizen. They can still get angry, they can still get frustrated, they can still pull out a firearm, and often, using firearms has deadly results. We want to protect our poll workers. We want to protect the right to vote. We don't want to intimidate anybody. We don't want to keep people away from the polls. We want people to exercise their freedom to vote and be comfortable and content and unintimidated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and others. We appreciate your time, and we wholeheartedly urge you to vote yes on this bill.
Thank you. Let's see, I do have a list now. I think next on the list is Timothy Haney. I hope I'm saying your name right, Mr. Haney, or Timothy. So we can bring him into the room.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Can we please promote Timothy Haney to the room? Okay. Timothy is not here, sir, so we can move on to the next speaker if you'd like.
All right, the next speaker we have is Molly Voight with the Giffords group. Molly, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Members of the committee, I'm Molly Voight, representing Giffords, the gun violence prevention organization founded by gun violence survivor and former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. We also wholeheartedly support this bill. If passed, Virginia would join 10 other states in the District of Columbia in protecting such an important bedrock, like Lori said, of our democracy. Guns have no place in polls, in our opinion, and can only serve to harm, not help democracy. So we support the bill and urge you to vote yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. The next speaker I have on my list is Laura Soninmark from the Brady United Against Gun Violence Grassroots Chapters of Northern Virginia. Laura, are you there? I see your name.
I'm here. I'm here.
All right. You're here. We hear you loud and clear now. Go ahead.
Hi. My name is Laura Soninmark. Actually, I'm not representing Brady here. I'm representing an election officer because I have been an election officer since 2012. Both for E-Day and for the early voting period, which we used to call in-person absentee voting. And I've worked every single general and primary election, both Republican and Democratic primaries. I have a lot of experience with this. And as an election worker, I absolutely support this bill. I've been asking our delegates and senators to support this for a long time. Voting is a right and a privilege, as everyone has said, but it's also something you shouldn't feel like you're being endangered about or that you're uncomfortable with. It's already uncomfortable. We already have really long lines and things like that. So it would be nice if people didn't feel intimidated or fearful. Voter intimidation is voter disenfranchisement. I just want to make that very clear that this is a way to disenfranchise people if you convince people that they're not safe when they're going to vote. More importantly for me, however, is the safety aspect of it. I've personally seen many people get into fights. I don't mean physical fights necessarily, but they get heated. They're waiting in line for a long time, way past the 40-foot line, especially this past election, for example. They get into arguments. Maybe they even go to the bathroom and forget their gun. I don't know, but regardless, it is a safety issue. I think it would be feel a lot better as an election worker.
15 seconds.
Safety and other safety if they didn't have guns. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it very much. I hope you will support this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for staying right on the time mark. Next up is Josh Horowitz. And I'm not going to do the organizations anymore. I'll just call the names and folks can introduce themselves.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you for this. Delegate Levine, thank you for this. The Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence strongly supports this bill. We wrote a report last year called Guns Down at the Polls with a number of other organizations. We looked at laws around the country. We were shocked at the patchwork of laws in Virginia and actually some other states as well. Fortunately, our Attorney General put an opinion out. We have seen incidents of guns at the poll. We have seen incidents of intimidation in the past. We think we need a bright line test so that all polling locations are treated the same in Virginia. It's very easy to do that. To be clear, I have a First Amendment right to vote. I have a First Amendment right to vote without anybody trying to intimidate me. The Supreme Court has said that sensitive places it's all right to regulate firearms there. It's completely constitutional. Schools, courts, and polling places should be right there. So this is not a constitutional issue. It's a safety issue, and it's an issue that means that we should be protecting mine and other people's First Amendment rights. And I believe that we should pass this bill. Thank you for your time, and thank you for introducing the bill, Delegate Levine.
Thank you, Josh. I am told that Timothy Haney is now in the room, the first person we call, so we can circle back. Timothy, if you could make sure I'm pronouncing your name right, and we won't count that against your 1 minute. If we can bring Timothy into the room. I was told he was here. All right. Maybe he's still having some issues connecting. So why don't we move down the list?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we are. Perfect.
There we are.
Go ahead.
Thank you all so much. And thank you, Chair, for your patience. Thank you to the committee for bringing this forward. And thank you so much, Delegate Levine, for this important work. I'm here speaking on behalf of Brady. We strongly support this legislation, especially at a time that America is experiencing political violence across the country when this is so relevant. We know that having firearms in places where democracy is taking place can have fatal consequences, and voter intimidation fundamentally threatens our shared constitutional right to freely participate in elections. We could not endorse this bill more strongly. We need to do everything that we can to protect our democracy. This is a really critical part of it. So we're so thankful to this committee for the work that you're doing around this. We strongly support this legislation. We thank Delegate Levine so much for bringing it forward, and look forward to its hopeful for its passage.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We have Scott Miles from the Office of the Attorney General. Scott, are you here to testify or as a resource or both?
Chairman Simon, I'm here to testify.
Excellent. Let's hear it.
Good morning. The Attorney General supports this bill both as a common sense gun safety measure and as a voter protection measure. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your brevity. Let's see. I think we next have Melanie Cornelisi. Melanie, if you want to introduce yourself, bring Melanie into the room.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh, look at you.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Melanie, and I'm a chapter lead for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. This is my Nate here in my lap. I urge you all to support the House Bill 2081. I myself have been threatened by gun violence when I was standing outside the polls, handing out ballots in my red mom shirt. A man I can only assume was with the local gun lobby didn't like that I was out there in that red shirt, and threatened to go get his gun. Thankfully, that didn't actually happen. I'm usually out there. This is a poll that's it's my poll, and it's in our a local junior high school building, and I'm usually out there with my older son, handing out ballots, and thankfully he happened not to be there that day when I was threatened. But I do know very personally that this is a thing that can happen when people get heated and don't like your point of view. I don't think it should happen to anybody. I think voting should be a right and a freedom, and no one should be intimidated to go and take part. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on my list is Jeffrey Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, I think you recently entered the room. So just so you know, we are limiting testimony to 1 minute per person. If you could confine your comments to 1 minute, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Jeffrey C. Jacobs from Herndon, Virginia, and I rise in support of this bill. Two things. Of course, we know what happened on January 6th, and Tim said it so eloquently. I do not think I can add to it except the tension that we know that has led to a member of this committee being relieved of the committee service. We are very concerned, and that is why we do need to de-escalate through removing the firearms. And just one other thing that I support closed carry. I support concealed carry. I have a good friend who is a concealed carry person, and he works at a facility that does not even allow it in the parking lot. He doesn't have that privilege to even bring his gun to his workplace. In terms of his parking lot, just staying in the car, this is much more flexible. As you just said, that you can keep it in your car and just vote and come back and your gun is still there. That's why I think we need to support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Next on my list is Joan Port. Joan, are you in the room? I'll give Joan just a second to get herself unmuted and turned on. Next on my list after Joan, if you want to get yourself ready, is going to be Jean Hanowich. So if Jean can get herself ready too. All right, why don't we go ahead to Jean, and we'll see if Joan's able to work out her tech issues. We can come back to her. But right now, let's go on to Jean Hanowich. Jean, are you in the room? Can you
Yes, I'm here.
yourself? All right.
I'm ready.
All
Good
right.
morning, Chair, and I would like to give my utmost gratitude to Delegate Levine for bringing forth this legislation. I agree with all the people that went before me in favor, and I especially want to reiterate the experience as being a volunteer outside of the polls. I volunteered for many different elections, and unfortunately, some people do get really upset, and some people feel that it's okay to, you know, threaten people that are outside. And I've personally never been threatened with a gun, but I have been threatened, like, just in general. So I do really appreciate this bill, and please vote yes. Thank you. Oh, and I'm also a Moms Demand for Gun Sense in America member, proudly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our list is Irene Shin with the Virginia Civic Engagement Table. Oh, I'm sorry, who we have? Yeah, I think Irene Shin is next.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Got it. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and Delegate Levine. My name is Irene Shin. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Civic Engagement Table. As Delegate Levine mentioned, we're a coalition organization comprised of more than 50 members who serve a diverse set of communities across the Commonwealth. One of the largest programs that we run every year is our Nonpartisan Election Protection, or EP program, in which we have hundreds of volunteers in dozens of localities across the state, making sure that every Virginia voter has they're fully able to exercise their right to vote with unencumbered access. And so we support HB 2081 because we think that it's a common sense measure that would support and protect not just our field volunteers who are out there on election day and through early voting, but also for poll workers and for Virginia voters. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Irene. Last on the pro list is Joan Port. If Joan is able to join us, we would love to hear from the League of Women Voters. All right. Well, Joan is signed up to speak in favor, and she's representing herself as the representative of the League of Women Voters of Virginia. So committee members take note. All right, we're going to move on to those that are against. First on our list is Vic
Excuse me,
Nichols.
Mr. Chair. I finally got the Zoom link to let me in. I didn't have it before.
Sorry, is this Joan?
Yes, sir. They just put me in the room. We just want to say we agree with everything that's been said, but we're also very happy that this bill protects not only the polling place, but the electoral board meetings and recount places. So I appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad I finally got in, and we appreciate the chance to speak to this. Thank you.
Well, we are very glad you're able to join us. I'm glad we got it worked out just in the nick of time. All right.
Thank you.
With that, thank you. Let's move on to the against, and we have first up Vic Nichols. Vic, you've got a minute. I know your camera doesn't work, but we're happy to hear from you. All right, we'll come back to Vic. DJ Spiker with the National Rifle Association is also on the against list. DJ, good morning. Saw you last night.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and I didn't get a chance to thank you last night, but do appreciate your work last night as well. DJ Spiker, National Rifle Association, a little unusual to be before the P&E committee. We oppose this bill for a number of reasons. Number one, this is a really unnecessary bill given existing federal and state law. Firearms are already banned in a number of polling places, whether they fall into a school, or other areas. Vast majority in Virginia would already be banned. Number two, last year's local government authority bill 421 already allows localities to opt into this, and there's a public hearing process. So localities can already ban this through the existing power. We don't need additional legislation. Delegate Levine cited specifically, he wasn't sure in instances where a number of the supporters in favor cited intimidation and safety concerns. As we saw recently in Newport News and enacting the local ordinance through 421, they specifically cited concerns about intimidation in the public for their public employees while granting a concealed carry, because they understood that a concealed carry does not lead to intimidation. There are not safety concerns because they understand that concealed carry holders are the safest and most law-abiding citizens in Virginia. And lastly, for us, it is a property rights issue. There are Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, JD. Thank you for adhering to the time. I appreciate it. Next up, we have Clara Wheeler.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Oh, good. You can hear me. Thank you.
Yep.
I come to speak in opposition to this bill as a former officer of election, poll worker, and member of both a local and state electoral boards. I have visited numerous polling places throughout the Commonwealth. The parking in these areas is of primary concern, and it's one of the most difficult things that we do in trying to select a polling place. The parking lots are frequently dark, they're frequently crowded, they're frequently out of the way beyond the 40-foot. So to get from a car to the 40-foot into the parking lot, a single female must walk alone.
15 seconds.
And I speak strongly that single carry, concealed carry is not intimidating to anyone because you don't know that someone is carrying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wheeler. That concludes the public testimony. And so we'll go ahead and close out the public hearing portion of this bill presentation. Delegate Price, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because my locality was mentioned, I wanted to speak up and just caution when the speaker was mentioning Newport News and the ordinance that was passed that does allow concealed carry. I would just ask that it be noted that political calculus not be misinterpreted as alignment with the gentleman's statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Price. So we are half an hour into our 2-hour meeting with a hard stop at 11. This committee operates by motion.
Move to report.
The move to report. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that this bill be reported. The clerk will please open the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Adams, the clerk will destroy the roll. Delegate Adams, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Well, yes, I was going to ask if there's time for argument on the motion. I would make some comments.
All right, I'll go ahead and recognize you, Delegate Adams. If you want to please remind us of your position on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am opposed to it. And I just want to point out, there was no discussion about existing law that already prohibits intimidation of voters at polling places. There's no discussion about whether that law is ineffective for these purposes, how many arrests there are for it, but it is already illegal. And of course, that justification, which is the only justification that's been offered today by any of the speakers and any of the, by the patron, as was pointed out, does not apply when someone is carrying concealed. And as we did hear in some testimony, this law would cause some interference with the lawful carrying of a concealed weapon. I don't think this is a policy that we should adopt, and would ask the members to vote against reporting it.
Okay, I see a couple of hands up. If you all will be brief, because we do have a hard stop, and I think I already know the outcome of this vote, but I see Delegate Levine would like to respond.
Mr. Chairman, I will be brief. There's a certain peace of mind of a voter knowing that there are no guns in the polling places. Whether they can see the guns or they can't see the guns, they know that it's prohibited. And I think that that peace of mind is something that we help here. Finally, I just want to admit that the Voter Registrars Association of Virginia, which includes registrars all across the Commonwealth, support this legislation, including the Registrar of Wise County that came to me just yesterday and said why she strongly supported this legislation. I urge its passage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Delegate Price, your hand is still up? No, okay, that's from what before. Got it. All right, so the clerk will, again, we have a motion properly seconded to report. The clerk will open the roll. Members will cast their votes on the electronic voting pad.
Mr. Chair, I will now call the names of the members that I do not see voting on the voting board. Delegate Simons. Delegate Simons.
All right, Delegate Simons and Volkenberg are in another committee. So I will go ahead. The clerk will close the roll, and the bill reports by a vote of 11 to 9. Members of the public watching, Delegate Van Valkenburg and Delegate Simons do have an opportunity before the end of the legislative day here